as whirling disks or rotating spheres and such like scintillating manifestations of the complex. Pluto in Taurus in the 8th, the UFO complex. And so on. And it's a very important work because it brings astrology into close relationship with psychology. And after all, that's the great plum in the esoteric world, is to be able to interpret a horoscope which can tell us an enormous amount, not available to ordinary psychologists, interpret a horoscope in psychological terms, and to be able to give advanced information on complexes that will be presenting themselves or lie latent in our unconscious. So we think that we have a very exciting manifestation of the new age, the ability to correlate psychological complexes with astrological aspects. Now, we move over to consider the more esoteric aspects of our subject. Quite a long time ago, I became very interested in the phenomenon of numinostic energy, and it occurred to me that the way to learn to control the inflow of it into myself, into anybody, would be to observe the mechanisms by which it functions and operates. And so I carried out an experiment to observe something of this. And my method was to take the Morse code, a system of dots and dashes correlated to the alphabet, and to present them to the unconscious. And then, with the kind of mind that I have, controlled mind that I have, to observe what would come back. We've already seen from my earlier illustration that positive prayer puts things into the unconscious, and that negative prayer can draw things out of the unconscious. But that the process, by virtue of the nature of religion, is very restrictive. And so that it occurred to me that if I could present the letters of the alphabet in Morse to my unconscious, I could observe what would be returned to me. And we might then be able to discover whether there were certain sounds or certain images being presented to the unconscious which might be more numinostic in the resulting output from the unconscious, and therefore have some use to us. It's a difficult subject. People present questions to the higher self, and they expect answers in terms of our world. They want answers that conform to length and breadth and height. They want answers that have meaning to us in terms of the education we've been given at our schools. They want answers that fit in nicely to our concept of personality consciousness. They become disheartened when they pose something in a meditation, like a cross, and get back something they don't understand. They think, I'm all messed up. I need to purify myself further and try again. It may be, and I'm sure it is, that the average esoteric student, even the advanced ones, don't understand the process involved in presenting the unconscious with something. Because that's how the unconscious expresses itself. It needs to be stimulated from our waking world. It needs it. Change can only come to it by enactments going on in the conscious world. And so it occurred to me that if I took something very mundane, very ordered, like the Morse code, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It occurred to me that if I presented these symbols to the unconscious, I might be able to watch what would come back and be able to measure the degree or the amount of energy associated with what came back. Now, I know this sounds abstruse, but you must just understand that you can't have everything easy all the time. And so, if we took, for instance, I have already done this in the ashram, if we took, for instance, the letter C, da-dit, dash dot, the letter C, we could present it in our diaries to the self, to the higher self. The higher self is always communicating with us. Communicates in dreams, waking dreams especially, vrittis, in hypnopompia and in esopompia, the period of coming into consciousness from deep sleep in the morning. The higher self, I'm talking about you now, communicates with you. The period of going to sleep at night, the higher self communicates. It's about the only opportunity it's got to reach you consciously. And if you communicate with it, and we're communicating with it all day long, and more so when we practice something spiritual. Anything practiced spiritual is part of a dialogue with the unconscious or with the higher self. Compassion is establishing a dialogue with the higher self. The use of will to good is establishing a dialogue with the higher self, an immensely old being that has taken hundreds of lives to grow, to manifest. And he has grown as the result of the dialogues established by each life on earth. We dealt with this last night. He is an immensely old being, your higher self. He's not interested in English, nor in French, nor in Hindustani. He's interested in eternal values. And so, the sort of language that he is likely to respond to is symbol. Symbols that don't change. Life after life, we use different languages, but the symbols tend to be the same. The symbol of procreation, the symbols of nutrition, the symbols of homeostasis that have accompanied us for hundreds and hundreds of lives. These are what the higher self wants to communicate through and to feed us energy with. And so, you might present dash dot, or C in your diary, or you might say the word C, visualize the letter C, or you might say da-dit, 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 da-dit. And whilst you are sounding that, you may at the same time concentrate strongly on the letter C. Now what would come back? What would come back? And what would come back would be important, because if you could observe the response to each letter of the alphabet, and you could record the images that came back, well, then you have an alphabet. An alphabet not in dot dash, but an alphabet of images, an alphabet of images. And where there is an alphabet common to two people, they can establish communication. I want to remind you that this was an exercise that I was engaged in for a long time. In an initial attempt, before the astrology, an initial attempt to establish a dialogue of communication with a higher self, not for me, but for students everywhere. It was not to be, but the work that was done was valid. And it's interesting and might be of assistance to you. I think it could be. The first thing that came back straight away was a pair of spectacles. A pair of spectacles. A pair of spectacles. Or what do you call it? A lorgnette. Which is dash dot, dash dot. But taken and altered. That's what you have to understand with all images. That they are not the same. They're constantly changing, but retain the basic meaning. I see, pair of spectacles. See with the spectacles. And so several meanings are given there. The dash dot is not denied. The morphology is still there. Now that's the sort of thing that you have to understand when you begin to probe the unconscious. That is what you must expect. Or another image, the sea. I see the sea. Another image that comes back. Another image, 2 claws. 2 claws. There it is. See? A claw, 2 claws, Cancer, the sign of Cancer. And Cancer rules clawing. And especially the clawing of a kitten feeding at the peak. Clawing. C for Cancer. C-A-N-C-E-R, 2 C's. Cancer rules the sea, shallow sea. And in our astrology, it's the shallow sea, the shallow green sea. It's the sea that goes only to a depth that will support wildlife, shellfish, crabs, Cancer the crab. The sort of sea that you were seeing all around you in Greece. And so, negating ordinary thinking and using abstracted thought. Mantras are a method of transferring energy into the inner world for your use. You can prove this quite easily. If any of you have the ability to be conscious whilst your physical bodies are in bed asleep, you can do this. Tomorrow night I show you a dozen ways, a dozen proofs that man can be conscious while his physical body is asleep. How many of you roll out of bed every night? Not many, I hope. Probably not anybody in the room rolls out of bed every night. You sleep well, but something tells you not to turn any further. There is an element of consciousness in us even whilst the physical body is asleep. Now, if that consciousness can be heightened so that whenever we do sleep we can retain this element of consciousness, we might learn to sound the mantra. We might learn to sound the Om. We might learn to use the great invocation. We might say the Lord's Prayer. We might sing Land of Hope and Glory. We might even use some of the great healing mantras that the Christian religion has evolved. I see people laughing about Land of Hope and Glory, but you should try it first. There's an awful lot of energy being inculcated into the symbol of Land of Hope and Glory, let me tell you. And whilst you may not be able to assert your energies, focus your energies to break through that frontier, with the assistance of mantras, it can be done. If you were to do this, you might see the immediate effect of saying the Lord's Prayer or the Great Invocation. As you sound words, it seems as if they jut out from you like a torrent. And as they jut out from you, devas shoot into them and form, as it were, spurts of energy. They take up the sound. It is as if they are feeding upon it and building themselves into the sound. They actually make shapes and forms out of the sound. And they rush to you. Now, if you have been able to do this on many occasions, you learn to use this energy that is supplied to you by the attracting of the devas to penetrate the higher kingdom. Then you may perhaps visualize a point of light. You may have the ability to visualize the face of the Master. You might have the ability to flash a symbol into your consciousness, and using the energies thus accruing to you from the devas of sound, you could penetrate the next kingdom. The use of mantras, most important. Don't think for one moment that a mantra only exists when it is sounded in the world of physical energies. Not at all. On the contrary, sometimes the use of excessive sound and words like the Om is wasteful. That it is far better to make the sound inaudibly, thus holding the maximum amount of energy inwardly. One day it may be possible to show that many nerves in the body function, as it were, at a sort of subclinical level. That you don't have to make a noise with your larynx, but the vagus nerve can be functioning, making a noise in the inner worlds, which is not heard in the outer world, but tests will show that these nerves function. There are many ways in which we can learn to meditate and how to meditate. Some of them are very gentle. Now, the first thing to understand then is that somehow or the other we have to deal with the mind. And the Westerner finds this so difficult, so very, very difficult. My friend, the great Swami Rama, said, without concentration, meditation is not possible. Without concentration, meditation is not possible. Now, I'm sure many of you have practiced transcendental meditation. It is a name, but I too add my opinion to Rama, that meditation is not possible without concentration. Just as iodine is the mechanism by which the frog changes from a tadpole, a water animal, into a land creature by metamorphosis, or the larva changes into the pupa and the pupa into the butterfly. Focus, concentration, is the mechanism by which man takes himself out of the fourth kingdom into the fifth. Now you can crucify me, and I would never retract that statement. It is something that I have discovered and use every day of my life. And until you learn to be able to focus your energies, the kingdom of heaven will not be taken in full consciousness. It will come to you possibly in other ways, but not in full consciousness, not by your own volition. Rama also says, the uninterrupted flow of mind, manas, towards an object is called meditation. And only when you have calmed down, negated the action of these emotionally saturated emanations of the mental kingdom, which we call thought, only then are you able to focus the attention, and then the energies of manas will flow towards the object of the meditation, so that you will see identify its manas, identify its soul, its components, its spiritual components. The results of practicing concentration outwardly help. Of course they help. To be able to concentrate on an object or a pinpoint outwardly is very fine, but it's not meditation. Meditation or concentration on an object can only occur within you. It's very nice to say, I meditated on a rose this morning, on the opening of the bud. Very nice sounding, very fashionable to say that. But in the end, you must have something to focus on inwardly. Hence the value of visualization. Study the rose as much as you wish, but in the end you must visualize it and focus on what is visualized in order to get the stream of manas down, so that you can be aware of the true nature of that rose. Bringing the mind to a point, that is what is required. And there are many meditations to do this. And do remember that meditation begins the moment that you, of your own accord and of your sincerest goodwill, attempt it. Meditation begins when you attempt it. The path is the goal. Struggling to meditate is part of the path, and the path is the goal. Do you remember that? You're on the path long before you reach the goal. The path is the goal, or the ultimate, I should say. And so we need to have exercises to bring our minds to a point. We need to have exercises in order to be able to focus on the concept, for instance, of peace and harmony. How do we do it? You take your mind, which is the tyrant, your tyrant, perhaps for 30 or 40 years, and you weaken it. These words, of course, must be understood in their correct context. Rather than allow the mind to use its forces on you concentratedly, spread it out. Thin it out. You can deal with what parts you wish. And of course, the visualization of a large ocean or a calm lake means that you have spread the mind content out like a film of oil over the lake. You have the visualized lake. And if you want to spread peace and harmony in the world, or if you have somebody in mind that needs help in this respect, visualize a calm lake in the color blue, and a central point from which the waves are radiating outwards. If you don't know what I mean, toss a stone into the little lake outside here, and you will see the cyclic, rhythmic waves going outwards from a central point. Visualize this lake in blue and a central point from which waves are radiating outwards. Waves of peace. See a particular storm center in the midst of the lake which is ruffled. And visualize there that person, that center that you want to reach. And see them there, or whoever it is there, and see the lake's waves gradually ironing out that point of storm, as it were. There is a meditation which you can use for bringing the mind to a point, an exercise rather than a meditation. Again, visualize a great deep blue sea like the Mediterranean, one that's not too big, not a great big one like the Pacific, but a nice little one like the Mediterranean, and see this great deep blue, cerulean blue of the Mediterranean. And then see a tiny little island in the middle of the sea. And the island has got lovely green grass going right down to the edges of the shore, all the way around the island. And right in the middle of the green grass, the verdant green, there is a castle. 4 grey walls and 4 grey towers. And right in the center of the castle there's a courtyard of grit, material like that. And in the center of the courtyard, a round pool with clear water reflecting the blue of the sky. And right in the middle of the pool there's a flower, a water lily, floating there. The water lily has scarlet tips and white body to its petals. And right in the center of the water lily there is a lovely stamen with yellow pieces and so on. What have you done? You have taken your attention, which has been on a vast sheet of ocean blue, and you have drawn it down by the easiest and nicest of methods to a pinpoint. It's up to you how much further you go. And if you can do it once, you can do it again. It's up to you. Follow you. The lotus. Inside the lotus there is the mesophyll of cells. Inside the mesophyll there are the chloroplasts. Inside the chloroplasts there are molecular combinations. Inside the molecules, atoms. Inside the atoms, anu. All you have done is to bring your attention down to a point. And that is something which is very, very important. Meditation has many applications, and so many of them are useful to us, especially in the field of stress and distress. The West is inundated constantly by stress. You know that and I know it. Stress is here to stay. It is part and parcel of our way of life, and we've got to get used to it. It's part of the characteristic of the fifth subrace for us to have unremittent stress. Now, stress is good for one. Stress actually assists us to grow. The greatest authority on the physiological applications of stress, Hans Selye, says just this. What is the problem is how to deal with stress that turns into distress. Distress, disease, disorder. Stress on its own is fine. As Selye says, we need a preventive measure to buffer us against the harmful effects of stress, which will still allow us to enjoy a full and busy life. But we have it. The Orient has given it to us. Meditation. Ohio State University has shown quite clearly that in two groups of individuals, one group did better with distress, as it were. Group A were certified meditators of long standing. Group B were non-meditators. What was found was this, that Group A, who had meditated for many years, had more life changes going on and less illness. And Group B, that had never meditated, had less life changes going on but more illness. And again it's being shown that although the person who meditates is more sensitive than others to changes, that they are able to deal with the changes without becoming distressed. How is this monitored? It's monitored through the chakra known as the outer major center in man. The outer major center is the only chakra in man which is sagittally placed. By that we mean that it rotates, as it were, it rotates this way, sagittally in the body. All the others rotate that way, but the outer major center rotates sagittally. The axis of the outer major chakra is just between the angles of the jawbone, or if you like, just where your earrings would hang if they weren't too long. Just there. In fact, earrings, the esoteric importance of earrings was that they hung in such a position that the intake of prana into the outer major chakra was modified, altered, or qualified by the quality of the stone hung in that region in the earrings. And so we have here a chakra of some importance, hardly ever described in the Orient, but very recently in the Alice Bailey books and taken up and a little further in my own, the outer major chakra. It is the chakra par excellence which is responsible for creative staying power. The individual who has a highly active outer major chakra is the person that can remain creative into old age. It is able to absorb energies, prana, directly into the vortices which lie on the surface of the skin of the neck. And this prana is radiated upwards mainly to Ajna in the brow region and to Sahasrara, the thousand-petaled lotus. More than this, it has its own endocrine glands related to it. These are called the carotid bodies, which lie in the bifurcation of the carotid artery in the neck. These tiny little endocrine bodies balance the gases in the body, the carbon dioxide and the oxygen in the body. And of course we all know that it is through the balancing of gases in the body that we are able to control prana. We use breathing mechanisms, certainly. But the ability to deal with the prana is governed to a great extent by our breathing mechanisms, and these are, in great measure, controlled by the carotid body. We should remember to study breathing exercises carefully and learn them from a person who is wise and qualified in this respect. Let me say unequivocally that I know of several cases in which individuals in the West have practiced breathing exercises and hatha yoga and have developed fibrillation, a rapid contraction of the heart muscle at such a speed that the heart muscle becomes inefficient, unable to pump blood out. Fibrillation is a very, very much more common experience with Westerners as a result of hatha yoga practices, breathing exercises, than we might think. We must remember that breathing exercises have a vast range of applications. The so-called dangers of breathing exercises are not understood even by the most qualified yogis who haven't the faintest idea of anatomy. They are talked of as dangerous. This is perfectly true. What we're beginning to understand, though, is something about the physiology of the danger of certain breathing exercises. We're beginning to understand that over-breathing is one of the greatest curses of the Westerner who begins to practice hatha yoga. He begins to produce a condition in him, and I have experienced it for many years, known as alkalosis. There's nothing dangerous in it per se, but it produces symptoms which are exceedingly uncomfortable. And alkalosis is produced as a result of certain measures which we take as the normal part of yoga. First of all, relaxation. We learn to relax. And part of the relaxation that we do results in a dropping of the amount of carbon dioxide in the body, which is acid forming. And so we drift into yoga exercises and we learn to relax. I do. I can relax like that. I can walk out of this room and I can, in a minute and a half, I can be completely relaxed and go into theta. But immediately the amount of energy being burnt by the cells is reduced, the amount of acid-forming carbon dioxide is reduced, and so the body edges towards alkalosis. At the same time, we learn to breathe more efficiently. Our yoga teachers teach us. And we breathe more efficiently and we get rid of more carbon dioxide than we normally do. And again, the body is edged towards alkalosis. Now, what happens when we get alkalosis? There are many symptoms of it. A pounding in the head. It's not dangerous. It's as the result of alkalosis. A sensation of blackness when we get up. We think to ourselves, good heavens, I need some air. Have I got heart trouble? You go and throw open the window and you breathe deeply and you push yourself further into alkalosis. And it's a very uncomfortable feeling. I go into alkalosis every night, merely through going into a relaxed state, what you would call sleep, and breathing more efficiently. And so we have to learn about how to deal with alkalosis. It's not a serious condition, but some of the things that you might be worrying about in your body are related to alkalosis and acidosis. I shall try to take the subject a little further tomorrow. But of course, one of the aims of the various breathing exercises is to create an acid condition by practicing kumbhaka, when you hold the breath for long periods or hold the state of being breathless for long periods, creates an acid condition, which is quite comfortable in normal people, but they should have been medically examined beforehand. If you have respiratory disorders, you should not encourage acidosis. And many Englishmen have got respiratory disorders, as we well know. And the advantage of creating a slightly acid condition is that when you change the breath into a rapid intake, say for instance the bellows breath, you go from acidosis into alkalosis. Now, if any of you have studied yoga, or shall we say the processes of ancient wisdom with any intelligence, you would know that when there is the most delicate movement of change in the body, nothing happens. It's when there is a sudden change that things happen. And some of the processes of yoga that can lead towards the samadhi condition, the state of ecstasy, where the downflow of energy is tremendous, is related to the sudden switch from an acid state into an alkaline state, from a stage of non-breathing into a stage of rapid breathing. Of course, I've had to leave out the element of prana for the moment. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have considered some of the elements of meditation here, because breathing can assist the highest moments of meditation. And if in meditation, as you should do, you calm the body down, you're relaxed, and you are gradually edging into alkalosis, might be that a breathing exercise which creates an element of acidosis at the height of the meditation, this can assist you to go from an acidosis into an alkalosis at the height of meditation. Immediately there is a change of electrical activity. That's what it implies. Any student of chemistry would tell you that. Change of activity physically can assist astrally, can assist mentally, can assist at the monastic level and the spiritual level. Just the little extra, the knife edge as we would call it. Don't spend your lives on the path avoiding stress. Stress is necessary for spiritual growth. And the stress, if it results through sacrificing yourself for mankind, will not only make you grow, but it will work your karma off. Serving mankind, reaching the masses, this lowers karma. All of us are bound to pick up karma. Any activity is karma-bearing. But be sure that your activities are for mankind and the karma will be reduced. Don't avoid stress. I know somebody who spends his life trying to avoid stress and thinks he's doing the right thing. What a lovely prayer that was that Tagore gave us, the Indian poet. Let me not pray to be sheltered from dangers, but rather to be fearless in facing them. Let me not beg for the stilling of my pain, but rather for the heart to conquer it. Let me not look for allies in life's battlefield, but rather to look to mine own strength. Let me not crave an anxious fear to be saved, but rather to hope for patience to win my own freedom. And none of that involves the avoiding of stress. Meditation is said to be the middle path. And indeed, it is. And one of the ways in which we can harness meditation to soul growth is to balance things in our lives. You know, this isn't only an Eastern concept. It's the beautiful prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, he who in his next life became the Master Kutumi, a master that most of us in this room have worked with in some life. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me so love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love.